Hello, and welcome to American Amnesia. I am Cliff Garner, your host. And of course, I have talked about this book quite often. It's a very good book. I do recommend it very highly. And some of the, since I'm rereading it, some of the information in it has jumped out at me, of course. And particularly, in fact, I'm not even finished with the chapter, but chapter 3 here, it's called Opportunity in the Promised Land, subtitled Social Mobility or Democratization of Competence. And what he is doing in this chapter is historically challenging the idea that social mobility was what made America unique among nations. If you ever read de Tocqueville and Democracy in America, he will talk about the essential lack of classes in America. Now of course, the slaves that would definitely consist of a completely different class. And their treatment was completely different, and it was not good. But the average person who was not slave, and this is regardless of color or national origin, religion, or anything else, any other factor, that the American person, the American man and woman, the free, not the slave or any of that, but the free person had a tremendous amount of dignity, and would not be looked down upon and treated as an inferior. Of course, there were richer people than others. There was differences in economic and even a certain amount of social setting, but the thing was that there was this attitude, really, that differentiated Americans from Europeans, and this has been a consistent thing through our history. But what is it? What thing? What quality, maybe, it was being enhanced in the person in America that is not being so in Europe or any other continent. And this is the question that Christopher Lasch is asking. And most people point to American exceptionalism as being our social mobility. And that's, I'm not going to slam that. The social mobility, the ability to rise above the station one is born into, is really a good thing. And it happens here in America quite often. There's people who go up and people come down. And that, I think, is healthy. I don't think you see that as much in other countries. That there tends to be a greater stratification of class in other lands, and that's something I think that Americans really don't quite get is the fact that class is an issue, and it is an issue here as well. It's just that it's one that is often neglected. And so he questions that concept, actually, and historically, there is good evidence that he is correct in making this, questioning this thing, that this concept as being such a core idea. And he goes to a few places to do it, and one of the ones that I find really interesting personally is Orestes Brownson. Brownson was an early socialist philosopher. Actually, he was pre-Marxian, and he was writing mostly in the 1840s, I suppose. He was part of the circle with Emerson and with Hawthorne and oh goodness, Thoreau and all those, and they were actually early socialists themselves, and they were utopian. They practiced communal living and things for a little while, but it all broke down, just like it did in the 60s here, in more recent times. And they had a lot of the same problems, people preach free love and they get jealous, sexually of their romantic partners. So this is not unusual. It's not unheard of. In fact, it's quite common. And Brownson was part of those circles, and his main focus was in the realm of education, basically. He had other ideas too, but he worked a lot with education, and that was one of the main focuses of his writing. And Brownson was actually a person who opposed Horace Mann, the educator, on his ideas of public education. And one of the things that I found remarkable that he, Lasch, pulls out is the idea that most people of the time, which, he's talking about the 1840s, 1850s, 1860s, in that era, just right around before the Civil War, is that they weren't so much putting kids in school like they do now. That actually kids were expected to learn from the streets, to actually interact with other people, and to watch others and what they did and see what they did and try to learn what they would be interested in as adults. And when they became adults, that they would go into a profession and things of that, because of the interest that was generated by their really just reaching out and freely associating with the world around them. And so that idea was of greater importance to people back then than it is to people today. And that we tend to see a very strongly regimented scheduling, for kids, which really probably doesn't suit them temperamentally very well, if you think about it. Kids in their imagination, right, and what stimulates that imaginative process and that gets their attention long enough for them to actually learn about, is that the natural curiosity is there. It's just that by the time they get through with schooling, very often there's very little creativity left, and that comes partly from what people do in their spare time, but it's also in what they do during the time that we don't call spare time. What is their regular time? What are they doing? Well, they in the old days, they used to have their errands first, but after their errands, they were free to do whatever they wanted, and they would often learn on the streets. And I think that's a rather fascinating observation that he made about that, and that Brownson opposed the idea of this regimentation actually, by calling education under such a regimen, actually a priesthood. Isn't that interesting? I'll go into more detail on this as I go forward in my reading here, but I just find this so fascinating that that this objection that Brownson makes, whom I did read when I was younger. He was a person I researched very thoroughly when I was a young person who was a socialist, actually. I was very sold on socialism when I was a teenager. And I still retain a certain amount of interest in it, and there are aspects of it that I don't really have problems with. But at the same time, I do have problems with other issues in it. But I understand why people are drawn to it, and there is a reason for that appeal, and there's also a reason that people keep coming back to it. The idea of communal sharing does entail a concept of community that we do not have being backed today by particularly one party that thinks it's really blameless for its fiascos of late. This needs to be rectified for them in order for them to come back with at least some kind of an opposition idea that is worth listening to in an argument. And I think that bringing in communal and community oriented that's Molyneux, but community oriented thinking in a way that doesn't negate the individual. This collectivism that has been pushed for some time now has run its course. And it isn't a collective so much as a community. What is the nature of the community of people? And what are the values that undergird community in a way that helps for inclining people towards to helping others? We've lost this vital link amongst each other in this terms. With populism, we're starting to see some of this coming back. The respect that underlies populism, I think we're seeing this coming up, because what we're seeing, and I think Styx Hexenhammer would probably call it a civic nationalism, and I think that's when I first heard him saying it, I really didn't like the sound of that. But the more I hear it, the more I think about it, the more I find it's really not that bad. It does describe a situation in which citizens, by citizenship, we are equals, and this ideal goes back to Rome, and I think that's pretty much where we Americans got this same idea, that by saying I am a citizen, I can take a certain amount of not only pride, but a certain amount of confidence and assuredness of that there is a justice that equals me to people who maybe or may think themselves higher than me. But at the same time, there's a leveling that goes on with this. And I think I think that's pretty vital. And so this does have an effect on everything else. All things interact at some level. So when it washes out, I think what we're going to see is that there is going to be more of a conceptual community in which a person can at least, as I did as a younger person, I was not a very patriotic sort. I don't know that you could say I am today. I love my country. I love this country as a physical place. And I recognize that my country is the people of it. And I am among them. And people I love are among them as well. This basic has ramifications that go beyond any sentimentalistic kind of claptrap, that makes it into this soppy greeting card kind of garbage. That there is a more fundamental patriotism that comes from an understanding of, or actually is an outgrowth probably, of the idea of your friends and family being your country. And that is really what it is. Who and what is your country? Well, that is your country. It is those people that are around you within the boundaries that are friends and relatives of yours. This is blood and life and love. So, removing the sentimentalism away from it is good, I think. I don't know that I've really ever had all that much sentiment. That really kind of mucky, slushy kind of feeling stuff. I see things in a little more stark and vital way, I suppose. So at any rate, the idea of community needs to be reborn. If people stay in the same place, from birth to death and never leave, that sense of community is tends to be enhanced. So we talk about small town life. And there's pluses in that, and there's minuses too. I mean, if you're not from a community and you move to it, especially a small town, that there is a corollary of that you are not from there, which I dealt with as a boy when we moved from Springfield to Jacksonville. And that can be very difficult. But at the same time, I recognize, and I always have, that among the people that I was living with in Jacksonville, even though I was rejected by a lot of the old timers and things like that, that there were friends that I had made, and that I had family there and stuff. And so this is what I was dealing with as I struggled with this issue of patriotism and what does it mean to be an American. And I originally rejected it entirely. I'm naturally kind of an iconoclast anyway, but over time I came more and more to see that vital element of friendship and family and love, and how it you're taking it out of the realm of abstraction and putting it into the realm of reality. And I think that's what needs to be done with the whole concept of patriotism, because otherwise it is this it's a very fake thing. I will have in the future, I'll have my friend Mario talk about his becoming an American citizen and what it meant to him, and that way you know you can get it from a person who bothered to become a citizen legally. There's a huge difference between that and just accepting en masse a bunch of people that didn't come here legally and go through all the effort, I suppose, but also the weight and the performance of what needed to be done really to become a citizen. The other is cheating, very clearly. I can't see how people can equate illegal immigration with legal immigration, because they're very different concepts. And as a person who lived abroad, I lived abroad legally, and so you know I had people that, well, didn't you feel like an illegal alien over there? And like, no, not really, except when my passport expired, I kind of did. I almost got in trouble over that, and there was another time when my visa had run out while I was in country, and I had to make a border run. But I paid my fines and stuff, and I got legal as soon as I could. So there is no equivalency here. Those are very different ideas. So that is something else that we'll be talking about very soon in the near future. But I did want to bring up that about social mobility, that the concept that Lasch puts in place of that, though, is hang on a second, it's democratization of competence. And what he's implying here is that when you talked about American workers prior to the real heavy industrialization that started in England and came to the U.S., I guess the 1870s, I suppose, is when the Industrial Revolution really hit. And it, I think that a lot of the ideas that came with that over here were more influenced by European thought than natively grown American ideas. What you did have in the 1800s was that you had a lot of people who read. I mean, they actually read, and they read Shakespeare and things of that sort, you know, without the benefit of having a whole class and things. You know, they did this out of pure joy. Your average working person knew things. They didn't just know, you know, how to do the job, but they knew things like scientific principles. They knew, and they got it from talking and reading. independently. The schools, were not as organized as they are today, but they were interested in these things, and because they were interested, they knew them and they would talk about them. De Tocqueville talks about this, how a guy that a mechanic that'll work on your buggy, maybe shoe your horse or something, the blacksmith, they will actually talk to you about science, which in France would have been basically an impossibility because the local peasantry didn't know anything. In fact, the ruling classes made sure they didn't. So what was the thing that made people learn? Was it because they were forced to do it? No, it was because they had a natural curiosity. They had a natural desire to do it. Was the point money for working? See, this whole wage slave concept was almost an alien idea in America. And where it comes from, and where it actually was a strong argument for why people worked, was more from the South. This is something else that comes up in this chapter, in which Abraham Lincoln, who was actually quite a thinker on his own right, but he disputed the arguments of the Southern slaveholders, summed up in, hang on just a second, where is that? The mud sill theory. And what this is that people were forced to work for money. Well, that wasn't the only reason they worked. They worked also because that's what they liked to do. If you're only working for money, then you become a wage slave. This argument is more of a European argument, and also it is the underlying argument that emerges in Marxism. So isn't it interesting that this argument that was promoted by the slaveholders to object to the idea of slavery as being a cruel institution, because a person had to pay so much for the maintenance of the slave, that this patronizing attitude towards the slave was not applied to the average working man, who was only given his money and told to go on his way, and he had to take care of himself and all other things. This wage slave idea would be the continuing idea from the slavery of holding a slave to the slavery of the dictatorship that would arise underneath of Marxist building towards the utopia to come. That's an interesting thought, and you can see that there's a continuum there. And it's not one that the Marxists intended, I don't think. But when you wonder about why communism never resonated very well in America, I think that something along that lines would exactly be the reason why it never took root here. And I'm finding that just fascinating. Like I say, Lasch, remarkable writer. I recommend anything that you can watch on YouTube by him. There's several, well, not several, but there's a few videos in which he was interviewed. And his work as a writer is just fabulous. There's the Culture of Narcissism being one of the better known works, which I'm going to pick up soon. I think I read it a few years back. So anyway, I'm sharing with you today, and there'll be more coming. And I plan to do some things with shorter news examinations. Just maybe pick up a article or something and go over it. So anyway, take care. Talk to you next time.